Welcome to My Wild Magic with me, your host, Adrienne Cobb. Join me on a journey back home to your truest self in this inspiring, enlightening, and entertaining show. After a near-death experience in a car crash at 15 years old, I made a choice to stay and brought back with me 3 simple truths that I found from the other side. Love is all there is. Our time is over here quicker than we think, and we all have a purpose, a soul blueprint to fulfill. On this show, you will find a higher purpose, a creative expression, and unique soul attributes that you can bring forth into this world. Stay tuned with me for the next hour and find your higher purpose on My Wild Magic, starting now. Welcome, everyone. I'm Adrienne, and you are listening to My Wild Magic with Adrienne on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour for the live Unplugged and Defying Gravity show. Today, we're going to have Tiffany Harelik on with us today. I'm so happy to have her on and letting her kind of share her own intimate, inspiring true life stories with us and how she leaped into the wild abyss of the unknown, defying gravity, and took flight to fulfill her own soul blueprint. She is an astrologer, a medium, a publisher, a beekeeper, and just a darn good person. So, all right, so just kick back and relax as we journey through this energy here with her. And she's also, stay tuned towards the end because Tiffany's going to go ahead and go over the October astrology forecast for us. So welcome, Tiffany, to My Wild Magic. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, cool. So, all right. So one of the things that you do that I'm super, super fascinated by is your bees. You are a beekeeper, kind of maybe a new beekeeper a little bit here, and you live out in Texas in the kind of like a little prairie land area. It looks pretty magical, actually. So what have you, like on a soul level, kind of learned from your bees?
The bees there are so many interesting little pieces. If you're talking about a soul level, what the first thing I thought of was all of the sacred geometry that's associated with beekeeping is so fascinating. It's not just the honeycomb shape, but when they go on their little orientation flights, not all of the maidens, not all of the workers will go forage, but the ones that are going to forage, when they take their orientation flights, they go out and they make a figure 8 and they come back, and they go out and they make a figure 8 and they come and they do that 3 times bigger. When the queen is laying her eggs, when she lays a drone, when she lays a boy, it ignites the Fibonacci sequence, which I don't know enough about to talk about, but there are so many just kind of goosebumpy things as you get into the bees. They are little temples of light. It's a very reverent place to be. And, I guess one of the biggest things that I've learned from them this last time I got into my hives was really about patience. You don't need to move fast. We are at the pace of nature. There's a sense of urgency isn't useful right here in the beehive.
Yeah, right.
And they're very efficient. They are very efficient. They work with nature. And it's not so much like a team orientation as they are a super organism. And so they're part of the bee oversoul, right? So if you think about like dog having a dog oversoul that it's part of, the bees are each one of those are that. And they each have different personalities. The different hives take care of each other differently. They take care of their dead differently. They treat their queen, with different mannerisms and things. And so it's a really fun hobby. And thank you for saying that I'm new, because I am new and I don't want to come across like a professional.
Well, I know one of the reasons I love bees so much is that when I lived in Atlanta, I found this beehive over in like a yard, and it just looked like I have a bad habit of like, I guess, sort of stealing things in nature that maybe was somebody's. Anyway, so it was this beehive and it was across the street from me, and it was kind of in this like lot where no houses were, right? And I'm like, beehives, I love them. And I was working with one of my spiritual teachers at the time, Cynthia Rose Young. And I I thought, oh my God, they've been abandoned and I just have to save them. You know how like you just got to go save something that doesn't really need to be saved. I mean, so I wrap them up in saran wrap, take them over to Cynthia's house, unwrap them. And I was out there one day, winter happens and it turns out there were bees in there. So, they kind of do their thing. And so one night I'm sitting out there and I don't visually see things that often psychically, but I was sitting out there one night and I was moving slow. I was just sitting there meditating with them and trying to stay out of the path because they do have direct paths, of what they go do. And all of a sudden, off in the distance, probably 50 feet away from me, this beautiful Deva being was standing there just sort of like an overlighting soul, like you said, like an overlighting presence. And she was tall and regal, and she had like a hive type head and this long flowing energy that was like a beehive. It was so cool. I'll never forget it. It was just so amazing. And they do just the overlighting presence. They say actually that bees are a gift from Venus.
I love that.
From Venus. Yeah. So, yeah.
The bees, they have that temple of light energy in our area. Nature, like the nature kingdom, will congregate around them. And so I was walking the dog down there one day. I mean, just close to it, and she went to smell a stick or something. She was like really into this stick, and the stick then like coiled back and started shaking its tail. And I thought, that's not a stick, right? And
wow.
So at first I was like so angry, right? Like, why is there a snake in my beehives? Like, are they going to mess it up? And what I later realized is all of nature likes the energy that it's producing there. And so, it wasn't there to mess with it. It was just there energetically. And that's not the only visitor we have at the hives, right? So now I have different kind of painted cinder blocks that I keep around them so that nobody can get in and knock them over.
That's really cool. Well, I just love it. And I just think that bees are like, to me, they're one of the best little beings on the entire planet, because without them, we really do not have life ourselves, really. The flowers, the food, I mean, everything depends on them. And I know they've had quite a plight, with all the herbicides, pesticides. I know you recently had, a little scenario with that too, where you lost a bunch of them due to herbicides, pesticides, and it's sad. I mean, I read this article where people even steal huge beehives off of other people's semi trucks when they're trying to move them from locations. I mean, it's a very bizarre thing. Anyway, well, so it is, send them love, send the bees love.
And that you're absolutely right. Like, that's why I got into beekeeping was, okay, if we're going to be eating from our garden, then let's help the pollinators and make it this really beautiful ecosystem out there. But that only, the bees will fly 2 to 3 miles out and 2 to 3 miles back. So they could do 5 to 6 miles round trip. But so we can't keep them on our little place. So if they're going to forage something that has pesticides on it, then we run into big problems. So it's really clear how some simple shifts, some like using vinegar to do your weed killing or doing, something a little bit more natural has a huge effect on what goes into our soil and into our bees and into our pollinators and into the food that we're eating. So
everything. It's I just read this whole article even on with children, particularly in utero, getting incredibly sick, like the amount of pesticides, herbicides, and heavy metals coming into our system and then into utero is having a major effect on kids' health, coming in already kind of pre-polluted in a sense, so it's a lot. It's a big deal. So, well, that's the bee conversation. We're moving on from there now. So the other thing, because Tiffany's just such a variety of such a multidimensional being. So the next thing that Tiffany does that I was mentioning is she is a book publisher. She has a Stillbound Publishing and is super, super awesome with that. She has a number of books out herself. I have a couple of her books, and she did a whole tour, which is one of my favorite things, of the food carts. And she did it in Portland, Seattle, Texas, like Austin, those 3 main cities.
Austin and Dallas and Houston, Columbus, Portland was by far the king of them all.
Yeah, that's where I live. So I just love the food cart scene here. So yeah. So she's done her own books on all kinds of cool things, and she is my publisher for my books as well. And yeah, so I was wondering, because I have a lot of people who are clients and do sessions with me, and they want to write books. And one of the things is, if you were looking for the right publisher for you, what would you recommend for people looking for a publisher that is for them?
Well, there's two main ways to get published. One is traditionally with an agent, and the other is indie publishing. So either creating your own publishing label or working with somebody like Spellbound, who's an independent publisher. And so really what you want to do is find a book that's kind of like yours, that has similar goals or similar audiences, and see what they did, see if the label that they're on might be taking queries and welcoming you. But the main thing is before that, just get the book written, right? Like that's where we get stuck so much, right? Like we want to, but yeah, people writing books out there, those are the two main ways. And they each have a different, there's different goals, right? So if you're doing fiction, maybe you want to be something that's a little bit more traditional and mainstream that can get the word out better than maybe you and a smaller audience could. If you're doing nonfiction and you have a broader appeal, or if you're a teacher and you have students and classes that are going to be buying your books, then something more indie might make more sense. You might make more sales that way. So I know that money isn't always the goal when we're writing a book, but sales are. And so
yeah, sure.
You want to find the best home for your book.
Yeah, for sure. And then and then what do you think about, finding a publisher versus self-publishing? I know when I first started, I did self-publishing, and it was a great experience, you know what I mean? But at this point, I kind of just like being housed with your energy, but there's differences between people self-publishing and publishing.
Very much so, yeah. So people that are self-publishing, that are just DIY, I think the most important thing you can do is have a great cover, and then have a great editor, and then follow the process. It is not easy. And so that's why I like being under somebody, at least for your first book, or if you just want the relief of not having to know the ins and outs or learn the ins and outs. Publishing, like social media, right? It's constantly evolving. There's new groups, there's new things. And so you just want to, for me, it's like nice to be with somebody that has been there, that can kind of take you under their wing and get you through the whole process. I don't think I answered your question. Sorry.
Well, you kind of suggested it. Yeah. I mean, basically it sounds like if you're first time out, there really is so many things to have to learn and do. Yeah. And it is nice to have somebody to kind of hold your hand and bring you through the ropes. And once you learn it, if you want to break out on your own, sure. But you might find that it's just easier to work with a publisher, and you create it's kind of a very personal relationship, I think you find, with a publisher, because you're dealing with a whole creative energy of like your book cover. And it's interesting, like having to have a voice. Like you have to say, I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. I found that was one of the more challenging things for me, actually, is having to get more clear and communicate my preferences.
Like it is so hard when it's yours.
It is.
About my work, it's nice to have a publisher or somebody in the industry that can say, let's try this one, or can bounce ideas off of you, or helps you see something that maybe you didn't see, and to give you options, really. So I totally agree. That relationship, you're really with people for a long time, for the life cycle of your book. So you do want to get that right. You do want to have what feels like a really open relationship, a helping hand, open communication. All of those things are going to be really important when you're trying to find the best publisher.
Yeah, definitely. And then, one of the things I've really liked about working with your company personally is that you don't put a lot of pressure. It's like you hold space. You're very galactic, so you can multitask and get a lot done. And you're like, here's the timeline, here's what we're doing. But I've never really felt a lot of pressure. I think some publishers also, that might trip people out a little bit if they feel, just depending on your personality type, you know what I mean, and how you flow and stuff. So yeah, you got a nice balance within stuff. So okay. Yeah, pretty awesome on that. Anything else that you want to share about the name of your company?
Spellbound. I wrote 14 cookbooks, and then I midwifed. I helped 200 other books come through. And so Spellbound to me is what we are is a boutique publisher focusing on metaphysical titles, mind, body, health, physical wellness, right? So Spellbound to me kind of brought that magical element in, and it's like you want a spellbinding book. You want something that's enchanting. And that's all. That's all. I did the logo. I redid the logo recently, and it's the winged cat. And it just came to me. So we switched the logo up. It's a winged Egyptian cat, and it feels just very interesting. And so anyways, I didn't know about it, but I then Googled it later and went to find that actually that was the flag and part of my lineage in Russia's community.
Wow, what a trip. Yeah, so cool. And I be loving me some kitties. I love some kitties. So that's awesome. Can't go wrong with that. The spirit sign. So yeah, that's awesome. That's a lot of books. That's a lot of people to be out there working with and stuff. So cool on that. I like that. So the other thing that Tiffany does is she is also a medium. She does intuitive work, mediumship. So can you tell us, well, actually back on the book title thing, can you give us your spellboundpublishing.com? If somebody was interested, how would they get in touch with you?
Okay. So it's spellboundpublishers.com. It's an S at the end.
Publishers.com. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then, so mediumship. Tell us a little bit, because that just goes in so many different directions. Do you talk with people who've crossed over? Do you talk with, animal communication? Do you talk with people about their relationships, money? So on mediumship, what's kind of your honed in version of that?
Sure. My niche, so like you, I also had a near-death experience when I was 14. And I love your intro because you say I made a decision to come back. I didn't know I was gone. You know what I mean? So I didn't make a decision, but a nurse there said, breathe, right? So then that made my body breathe, and I came back. And that was a very unique, opening for me. And so for a long time, I really didn't understand what was happening or why I could hear things or see things that other people couldn't. So I worked really hard to develop that skill. I studied with a lot of the British mediums. And so where I have landed is really with evidential mediumship when we're talking specifically with either a soul that has crossed over that so that we're going to be able to bring validation to you. My favorite part of mediumship. Okay, so first of all, it's really beautiful to work with somebody through the grieving process, to help them see that life after death is a beautiful experience, that their loved ones are well. There's a sense of relief that comes, that 20 years of therapy couldn't give you, right? When you get that
is
one
so
little
true.
word,
So true.
Yeah. But what really gets me excited is working with some of our law enforcement with missing persons. And so I have had the opportunity to do that a couple of times. And I just would love to bridge the gap between the law enforcement agencies and the psychic world, because right now it's just muddy and weird, and it doesn't have to be. It can be very useful. It's kind of like when you get hurt, you do all the things and then you go to the chiropractor. It's like the last thing that you do. But if it would have been the first thing you did, you would have been great, And I feel like my mediumship is that way too. Like we can do all these things and then you call the medium. Well, if you'd called them in the beginning, we might have had a chance. Right?
Yeah, right. A little bit easier. Yeah. And gosh, I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it's when you tune into something at a distance. The military kind of does it. Yeah, remote viewing. Thank you so much. Yeah, fascinated by the remote viewing. And it just seems as though presenting it to the police, way, just because so much of governments do that and CIA, it's kind of a little bit more accepted actually as that way of saying it. But have you presented that to them I do remote viewing? Do you do remote viewing? Because kind of intuitive work does that a lot without knowing it.
Well, no, I think that's a really good way to phrase it. So I'm going to take your advice there.
Okay, great. That's what I was hoping. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Russell Targ wrote an amazing book on remote viewing. It is the book on remote viewing. He helped start the Stanford Research Institute, and he actually used cops. He worked with cops in the beginning, like you're talking about. So it's not unusual. It's just not often the first thing that is used. So I would love to help make it a little bit more mainstream, or just be useful, you know?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think crossing over and just say I do remote viewing, because I mean, I think the psychic, anything to do with like the word psychic seems to spook people, especially, I don't know, older white men and police uniforms. I don't know, not to be, racist or anything, but there is a certain like kind of patriarchal sort of way of coming at things if I know stuff, and anything that gets into more of the female archetype of witchery in a
Right.
sense, and psychic stuff falls in that category is I think just automatically taboo. But when you say, well, the military does it, all of a sudden it seems like that industry, which probably is mostly male, might be a little more open to get on it with your military folks where they're doing it
I
and
like
starting
that.
wars. Yay. So anyway, yeah. So being able to help people. So I'd imagine it's kind of rewarding helping people, because it's so I've had quite a few clients who have had unresolved things of missing people, and it's kind of tragic, but it just leaves such a wondering about your loved one.
And so I'm glad you brought that up, because when you're connecting with a medium, or I guess maybe I should say my style is evidential. So I want to make sure that beyond a shadow of a doubt that I've got your loved one with me, that I'm not just coming up with some story that may or may not apply to some missing thing that nobody's ever going to know. That's not what we're after at all. I want to have really specific pieces of evidence. Did I tell you the sand dollar story lately?
No.
Okay. So this was one of my most recent, like, whoa, like I cry every single mediumship session I do. It blows me away, the emotional intelligence of spirit. But I had a client whose sister I had read for before. And so I was really intimidated because she also wanted to hear from her dad. And I wasn't sure if I could get it the second time. I was just getting really nervous, like there was an expectation there. And so I went through and I gave her lots of evidence. He's showing me that he was driving an old car and you guys were listening to music. And she said, yes, we used to do that. And we went on, and I gave 3 or 4 other pieces of evidence so that she knew that I had her dad. But I also knew that she was getting married. And I said, now he's telling me that he's going to be walking you down the aisle, and I'm going to give you one piece of evidence that beyond a shadow of a doubt that your dad absolutely said that I did not make that up. And then I'm going, what is that information? Bring it on in. And I'm like, okay, so I see a sand dollar. I said, how do you relate to sand dollar? What does a sand dollar mean to you? And she starts crying, and I'm crying, and I don't know why we're crying. And she said, I cleaned the fireplace out. We don't live by the shore. We don't live by the ocean. We had a fire pit, and I was cleaning it out last night, and she found a whole sand dollar in the fire pit. Like, what? And like the night before. And so that's the kind of evidence that I hope to provide for people in sessions, and that anybody under wise skies would be able to provide that level of clarity. We really don't want any vagueness. We really want specific information, names, the way they passed, what happened at their funeral, what kind of beautiful life they led. And then we want to go on into what is spirit life like for them, what has changed. And those are just some really beautiful healing moments.
Yeah, I do find that I know for me, I'm almost like I'm devastated if somebody dies, like I have a really big issue with it, right? But then I remember that, wow, they're at peace. I don't have to worry about them anymore in a way. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's a big deal just knowing that somebody's on the other side, that they're okay. And, sometimes even when there is a tragedy, I think that sometimes people do have judgments on suicide is a big one. And that's been just kind of taboo with church and religions and all that. But, sometimes there's just a time that people are ready to go, however they choose to do it. Or even if something really horrible happens, whether it's an accident or a slow illness, or they've been murdered or whatever. There's so many ways that people die, right? But who are we to say, really? I mean, and the minute I just hear that, hey, they're okay. Even my pets, if there's something with my pets, I'm like, I just need to know they're okay. And if they're okay, I will handle it. I just need to know that they're okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Pets are a big one. I
Pets are a big
often
one.
invalidate information by telling you, okay, there was like a small white dog at the time of their crossing. So I can often validate by telling you which pets were already crossed over, greeting your loved
Oh God, so sweet.
ones.
That just so beautiful. It'll make me cry right now. And then we'll be crying and we don't know why we're crying. Okay, so we're gonna take a quick break. So I'm Adrienne Cobb. You're listening to My Wild Magic with Adrienne, and we're gonna be back in just a moment with Tiffany Harelik, our guest here, who is multidimensional in many different ways, and she's gonna be letting us know what we need to know about October. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome, I'm Adrienne Cobb, and we're back on with My Wild Magic with Adrienne. So my guest today here is Tiffany Harelik. She is owner of the Wise Skies Collective. She does astrology, mediumship, beekeeping. She also owns spellboundpublishers.com if you're looking to bring a book into the world. And she's here talking with us today about what we need to know about rolling into October this month and seeing what's up, what we need to be aware of to be able to do this with ease and grace. But before we continue, Tiffany, can you let people know how to contact you through Wise Skies, which is her mediumship and astrology, or Spellbound?
Yes, sure. So Spellbound, you nailed it, spellboundpublishers.com. I'm Tiffany at spellboundpublishers.com. I'm the lead publisher there, and I'll absolutely guide you all the way through. And Wise Skies is wiseskiescollective.com. Wise Skies is a metaphysical counseling company that offers different sessions and all the fun things. And I have my own niches, but there are other readers and intuitives there as well, teaching classes or doing sessions. And so I love mediumship, and astrology is really where the company is anchored. So that's where the company got its start. And that's what, just one of my favorite things to do is to talk about the astrology, pull some tarot cards and see what the energies have for the month ahead.
So yeah, and she also has a YouTube station, which is
Wise Skies.
Yeah, Wise Skies Collective. Yeah. So yeah, she has a YouTube station too, and every Friday, if you go onto YouTube or whatever, I subscribe to her, so it just shows up automatically in my feed. And she does your astrology. She does astrology for all the different signs, like a little quick, snapshot of it. And I'm Aries, so I'm first because I'm impatient. So thank God I'm not Pisces. So that really works for me actually to start out my Fridays with your subscribe and like for your YouTube thing there. Yeah. So curious with astrology, because you just have all these different cool things. How did you get into astrology? What draw you to it? Yeah.
I was riding horses one day, and I got off of my horse and I came into town, into Austin, downtown Austin. And there was, I was just like looking around this metaphysical bookstore in my breeches. I wasn't planning on getting into astrology. And there was a class going on. So I signed up and I made some lifelong friends. The teacher was teaching slowly, like one planet a class. I think right now, this was 20 years ago, right? So this was 1999, 2000-ish, 2001. And so right now we talk about the planets like we give a quick sentence and we move on, but he was really going deep for hours on one planet.
Wow.
So I really got to absorb and learn from one of the living masters. So I just kind of tripped into it. I'm so glad I did, because once I got a natal reading, it made me feel, it's just like your soul blueprint readings. Like it was okay to be me. It was like okay to be multidimensional. It was okay to have a lot going on. It was okay to just sink into my bones, because there was a rhythm, there was a script for it. So that's how I fell in love with astrology, was just through the natal chart, through the classes. And then from there, you start learning how to make predictions. And so you're not really portending the future, but you're able to look at the planets just like like a meteorologist would be able to look at the weather. And that part fascinated me too, because I love gardening and beekeeping and all of that. I'm like, what is the astrological weather? What are the winds of change? Why is there such a sense of urgency and frustration? You know what I mean? Or why are there lots of emotions? Or why am I feeling void? Often the astrology forecast was an answer for me through a lot of different, peaks and valleys in life.
So what's your astrology? What is your sign?
I'm Scorpio.
Scorpio, yeah, cool.
I have
Love
4
it.
planets in Scorpio in the 12th house. And if you don't know that about yourself and you're going through life with 4 planets in Scorpio in the 12th house, and you're wondering why things are so intense or you're really turns out to be a great medium. You know what I mean? The astrology can help you just be okay with your own nature, you know?
Well, and I know that sometimes when I'm doing readings for people, like in the way that you use astrology to kind of forecast the energy, for me, when I'm doing readings with people, it's the nervous system. The nervous system is very predictable unless you interrupt it, unless you kind of give it new information, right? And so every once in a while, when I'm doing readings for people, you can feel their astrology is affecting them. Like I'll be going along in the reading, like, yeah, you could probably even see this astrologically right now. If you got your chart done, you could see where your astrology is actually pushing you in the direction of your life purpose, helping you to, you know, move through this relationship issue or why it's affecting your finances. So for you, what's one of your, yeah, I mean, how it affects people's life, but you know, what's one of your favorite things about astrology?
Well, all that, you know, I mean, that there is, okay, so there's like the astrology forecast, and then there's the astrology forecast as it affects you. And so it's two very different things. You know, there's the weather out there, and then there's the weather as it relates to you personally. So helping people navigate that, letting them see what's on the horizon. I have a lot of people that are either interested in looking at transits for their businesses, like when is the best time to write a book? When is the best time to launch a campaign? When is the best time to get married? You know, when is the best time for some kind of election activity, right? An elective activity. So that can be a fun way to work with the astrology. Just knowing the moon cycle, knowing the new moon and the full moon, knowing that we're such a small part in such a big like landscape of time. And, you know, somebody told me the wisest thing. She was like, time is that thing that's not real, that we're all controlled by. And I'm like, yeah, and that's how astrology was taught to me. It was like it's a big clock in the sky, right? And so they're different archetypes and different teachers, and they affect us differently. So I just enjoy, you know, studying human nature, studying human potential, and helping people really have those breakthrough moments, that huge sigh of relief, that like shoulder dropping sigh of relief, and just helping them with their own goals through their unique timelines.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about astrology is when things aren't going well, I just blame it on the astrology.
Right.
It's like my blaming thing. I'm like, that's just got to be the astrology on that level. And then, do you know much about Vedic astrology, like the difference between the Vedic and the like kind of the Western astrology, and also, I guess, the Chinese also? It's like there's 3 different systems here all happening. What do you think about?
Man,
All 3 ancient systems that date back 5,000 years. What can you tell me about that?
right? Well, I think that
Synopsis, of course. Yeah.
So I studied Western astrology, and maybe 12 years into it, I had a Vedic reading, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
You know, and I was like, no, I'm doing it wrong. I'm going to have to restudy this whole situation. And fortunately, I had an older female Scorpio. I always recommend you have a mentor that is like you astrologically, that has kind of walked your step. But she said, Tiffany, you were born in Texas. It's okay to practice Western astrology. Next time, you can be born in India. You can practice Vedic astrology. She said, what you're doing is valid and it's helpful for people. So don't abandon it. But what I can tell you about the differences, it somehow it all makes sense. Like if you get into human design, if you get into I Ching, if you get into 9-star key, if you get into Buddhism or Hinduism or any of the ancient philosophies and cultures, what are we really all doing? We're looking up for help. You know what I mean? We're like trying to get a sense of what's going on in here, and that all of them are describing that relationship as above, so below, as below, so above, that relationship between the sky and the earth. And so, you're going to be naturally attracted to a certain style, right? Your nature is going to be more interested in Spanish versus Portuguese, right? Like you're going to naturally just pick one. And now you can dabble in all of them. And I like to dabble in all of them. And that's why Wise Skies has so many different options. But, where is the intersection? I think it's just that human interest in our potential and our purpose, and the ability to look up and say help, or what, or anything like that.
Which is super appropriate, because I mean, even when you get into the indigenous cultures, they're looking up, they're talking about the stars, and a lot of their pictographs, they say, hey, we're coming from the stars, we've got these star energies that have come down. And a lot of the work, even with Greg Braden, has a lot of evidence about how we are star seeded here on the planet. And so these star systems, all the ascended masters and the great living or ascended masters and teachers all bring astrology into play, that it does have its own, like you said, in every culture around the world and all the indigenous cultures, it all kind of comes back. Yeah.
So you were talking about the stars, and I remembered this dream that I had. Can I tell you about it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was so weird because two friends and I all had a similar experience the same night. They didn't know each other. So I was the common denominator, but I had my kiddo with me sleeping, and she starts speaking in this weird language, and she's this like cute little blonde thing, and I'm scared to death, I'm like, and I wake up, and I somehow like went back to sleep, which is not like me. I like normally I'd be like up all night waiting for something. And I went back to sleep, and I dreamt immediately. And I was looking up at the stars, and my daughter said in my dreams said, it's okay, they're just looking in our eyes. And what I understood was that the stars were a language.
Chills.
I know, it was so crazy. And so when I'm looking at the stars, they're telling me like, this is our language, the star language. And I was like, oh, and the dream was like, I woke up at peace. I was happy. I wasn't scared at all. I didn't feel like alien abducted. But I had two friends with their kids that had the same night.
Whoa.
I know.
Wow.
So the star tribes are nothing to fear, nothing to be intimidated by. It's more like this childlike wonder, is my experience anyways.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a whole show on the Lyrians, the Syrians, the Pleiadians coming up for sure. But yeah, and how we've all come in. But I don't think it's exactly like Hollywood makes it out to be either. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like aliens, like they abduct our cows and, and take our bodies at night. That kind of thing. It's a little bit more multidimensional.
Pesticides.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I mean, they do very much exist, and they do, step in kind of as needed with humanity, I think, but it's not exactly like Hollywood portrays it as much as it is multidimensionalism and stuff. So we are going to take another break. I am Adrienne, you're on with My Wild Magic, and Tiffany Harelik, my lovely, awesome, multidimensional galactic guest. And we'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. I am Adrienne Cobb, and you're listening to My Wild Magic with Adrienne. If you want to check out any of the things that I offer in terms of Vision Quest sessions, all kinds of stuff, membership, you can go to mywildmagic.com. Again, that's mywildmagic.com. Today we have on our show Tiffany Harelik, and she is sharing with us her wisdom on astrology, book writing, beekeeping, and mediumship. So during the break, we were sort of talking a little bit, and I do have one question in terms of I feel really strongly right now because I'm in the middle of teaching this 21-day quest. And as we've been moving through it, it's so clear that we're really sitting in the energy of this new earth energy. It's a matter of just consciously making the shift of grounding into it. And since astrology affects our earth so much and all beings on the planet, how do you feel like astrology is affecting or cooperating with this new earth energy? Do you think there's going to be big changes with astrology because we're in this new planetary consciousness, or what's your take on it?
There's so many angles for that. To me, what we're working on is a consciousness shift, and to how we're seeing that now in 2021 has to do with the Saturn and Uranus squares. But before that, we had Jupiter and Saturn move from a 200-year cycle in earth signs into a 200-year cycle in air signs. And that day is when I shifted my business to be called the collective, Wise Skies Collective, because there is such a shift in the collective. And, you know, as far as the ascension timeline, this Saturn and Uranus that's happening 3 times this year, I'm describing them like gong crashes, right? We had them in February, we had them in June, we're having them again December 2021, and right now in October they're coming really, really close again. So the first couple weeks of October, you're going to feel that same sense of urgency, sense of volcanic eruption in order to change. But I know that it sounds like I'm droning on, but I'm going somewhere with it. So Saturn, you know, is very bordery and discipline-y and boundaries and hard lines and karma, and the grandfather energy. You know, Saturn is long-term vision and very fixed, right? And Uranus is explosive and Einstein and crazy. And so when those two are squaring off, you see things in the news. You know, here in Texas in February, we had the big snowpocalypse. It was very detrimental to a lot of people. Then in June, we had a break in our energy grid, which was also very detrimental to a lot of people. And I'm not saying like, oh, doom and gloom. I'm just saying systems are breaking down, and that's part of this new earth energy. And so it's like change before you have to is the Jack Welch quote I'm using for all of this. And so as part of this new earth energy, this ascension timeline, things do have to break down before there's that sense of peace and understanding and stability. And so we're in a very special time to be alive right now. You know, this moment, this year, this breath of new insights. And so I love how you talk about it, because I think that it's so much more grounding coming from you. The way that I see the astrology is a little bit more bubbly, right? Like explosive. So Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. So Uranus is changing Taurus things, our food system, the ways that we farm, the ways that we eat, the ways that we buy stuff, the ways that we do community eating together.
Hence why we all need to have a beehive on our property.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then Saturn in Aquarius, the sign of the collective, the sign of freedoms, and the feeling that some freedoms are being removed, and the feeling that you know, I guess looking at what is it that you want to feel free from is a big exercise. So I feel like all of this is leading up to a larger shift happening in 2027. And so I feel like we're in still at this like crescendo buildup period. But it's, if you think about it like a painting or a weaving, I don't think that there's going to be like one day when things are different, right? Like we're leaning into it. And it's a big, heavy lean in. It's like a Clydesdale lean in. You know what I mean? Yeah. So does that answer your question or not at all?
Yeah. So basically, we are shifting and moving, and that the way it's affecting the ascension timeline and this new earth energy, which I would highly, highly, highly recommend everybody that when they do focus on grounding their energy, that you start grounding it into the new earth energy. Normally I just say I'm sending my tube of white light all the way down to the earth. Now I say I'm pulling down that source energy. I'm sending it to the core of the earth, but to the new earth energy. And then I draw that new earth energy up to my body, and it's a big difference. And I'm finding that I feel like I'm a little bit, I'm not hanging on and near as distracted or disturbed with a lot of the old earth energy, a lot of the breakdowns that you're talking that do have to happen when we move into a new collective consciousness, being this Aquarian age type energy. So I find it's bringing me a lot of peace to just ground to the new earth and make that shift. And so just being aware that, yeah, stuff is going to change. But one thing that brings me so much positive vibes is that the Gen Zs and the millennials and all these star beings who have been coming onto the planet have so many new technologies that they're going to help automatically clean up things in the earth and bring in new infrastructures and new energies. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I have hope in that for sure. So with our October astrology then, is there more to it that you want to share October wise?
Sure. Yeah. Well, besides those big gong crashes that we're talking about that are part of this larger pattern, that shouldn't surprise us. We should be like, okay, we saw that coming. Interesting, you know, get curious. Isn't that curious? Instead of oh my God, big, huge human reaction, right? Just stay curious. It will be a good medicine to kind of ride the waves of October. In October, we have 4 planets that are going direct that have been appear retrograde to us here on Earth. And so that's a huge shift when 4 planets go direct. Both Venus and Mars are changing signs. To be more lighthearted, I would say Venus is moving into Sagittarius. And so that's kind of a fun one because Venus represents what we love, sometimes our money, our finances, our net worth, our self-worth. But Venus is that beautiful nature of things. And so when she moves into Sagittarius, right, it's like she's out of her black hoodie of Scorpio and she's into her like party gown of Sagittarius. So, you know, Sagittarius wants to learn foreign languages, wants to learn foreign cultures, wants to cook from a different culture's kitchen, you know. And so I just say that that's like a kind of like a let your heart roam wherever it wants to roam, learn something, enjoy learning about life, you know, enjoy the adventure. So that's a big shift too. Yeah.
And then, we've got a few minutes. So you said also that Mars is moving.
Mars is going to move into Scorpio at the end of October. So it will be a very intense Halloween season, I should say. So Scorpio is naturally ruled by both Mars and Pluto. Scorpio is also the Phoenix rising, but you've got to go through the ashes. You've got to go through the fire to get that transformation, that enlightenment, that sense of that higher vision that Scorpio is capable of. The eagle, that Scorpio is also represented by the eagle and the condor. So when Mars, this planet that fuels us, that's yang energy, that's warrior, spiritual warrior energy.
Rules Aries, right?
Rules Aries, but it also co-rules Scorpio.
Yeah.
Scorpio is co-ruled by Mars and Pluto.
Yeah.
And so that like warrior spirit, that pioneer, that one that's ready to go, that's got the gas in the tank, is moving into Scorpio, that very intense sign, you know. And so to me, because I'm into it, I like that energy.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a great time to get a good mystery book. I think it's a great time to dive into the unknown. It's a great time to study something behind the scenes.
Book sitting around, absolutely not. I just bought a whole bunch of rain gear. I'm like, let's get out in the world. Let's like get something going on. Yeah.
Right.
Yes, we got to go find some new entertainment out here in the world. Yeah.
Right. And I know. And so, yeah, both of those, because so Venus and Mars, a lot of people like to talk about love and money in terms of astrology. When are my relationships going to improve? When are my finances going to improve? Am I on purpose? Am I doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing? And Mars and Scorpio will help you find that sense of purpose, will help you find a higher vision, will help you tap into your why. So those are things to be looking for. Mars energizes and Scorpio changes.
Well, so as we kind of wrap up our lovely time together, Tiffany is offering a calendar through wiseguyscollective.com/shop, and you can get 50% off the 2021 calendar. Oh, no, let's see, a free
2022 is half off with your code for your audience.
Magic 50. So if you go to her website, which is wiseguyscollective.com/shop, you can go get 50% off the calendar, Magic 50. Yep. And then you can also book sessions with her for mediumship. You can get an astrology reading with her at Wise Guys Collective as well, or talk to her about doing a book with her at spellboundpublishers.com. Did I miss anything?
No, I really appreciate it. I'm really honored to talk with you. And
likewise. Have to have you back on. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And we will see everybody next week. Thanks for tuning in to My Wild Magic with me, your host, Adrienne Cobb. Each one of us has a soul purpose on this earth and a higher purpose full of creative expression and unique soul attributes. Make sure to tune in next week on transformationtalkradio.com to continue your journey home to your truest self and pursue the path of unconditional self-love. If you would like to learn more about me, visit mywildmagic.com. Again, that's mywildmagic.com.